How many people here are working on learning projects? What they call them, like learning projects. I see a show of hands, like LMS projects, creating content. Everybody, pretty much. Okay, great. How many people here are working on development projects? So when you take the L&D, like development plans for people in learning paths. Okay, smaller percentage, sort of like that's a good one back there, great. How many people here are working on competency or capability or skills ontology projects? Nobody. Has anybody heard about them? I've been like, I'm sort of, yeah, okay, back there, we got one, great. Does anybody feel like uncomfortable when we talk about competencies and skills a little bit? No? Okay, we've all seen them. Has everybody been aware of somebody who's taken on a project like that, it's failed miserably and they've gotten fired for it? Okay, bobbing head back there, great. That's probably why a lot of people don't like them, good. Okay, well that's some good background. I'd like to get that before we go into the talk. My name is Keith, we'll get into that in a second. And you're here to hear Grace and myself talk about where we think learning tech is going. I'm a vendor, right? We make software, we make SaaS software. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. And Grace talks to a lot of people like us, right? So we're excited for this conversation today. So let me just get going on it. So this is a big question that if you're sitting in the audience watching this presentation, you have to ask yourself. Because if you don't believe that we learn to perform, you're going to be really bored at the next little bit here. Because what Grace is going to do is she's going to talk about some technology emerging around this, and I'm going to talk about what Acorn is doing on this. It's a funny question that needs a little bit more definition. So I'm going to just walk into this as we go here. So I head up, I'm the president for North America at Acorn, and I head up our customer success, our sales, and I work with our product teams a lot. And what that allows me to do is see a lot of customers who are really trying to answer that question, do we learn to perform with technology? Acorn comes from an LMS background. We've been doing it 12 years, but along that journey, we came to the conclusion that although we had a really good LMS, a lot of people weren't using the content and weren't happy with doing the programs. There weren't many people doing the LMS on the weekend, right? They were doing it because they had to. And we came to the conclusion that we really need to try and connect that into performance. We have this core belief that people learn to perform. And if you're looking for us, there's a huge acorn hanging out from the ceiling, so it's not hard to find. I don't even need to tell you a booth number. And in that booth, you will find framed comments on social media from employees saying they hate their learning systems and they hate their performance reviews. And that really anchors us as a vendor, because if we feel if we can actually change that, if we feel that we can change the way leaders talk to learners, something remarkable will happen for us as a company and for the people we help. That's a little bit about me. I'm going to turn it over to Grace and let her do a quick introduction in a second. I'm going to do a little bit of the Acorn stuff, and then I'm going to pass it over to her, okay? So, besides the booth and the social media comments, we love data. This is probably one of the things that Grace and I, we met each other. We just started, she says she nerds out on data. She has some really cool data that she's going to talk to you guys about from a G2 perspective. We like collecting data a lot too at Acorn. So what we did is we did a survey of about 1,200 people, and we did it from different organizations with different roles and different professions, HR and L&D. And it told us some things. It told us that 96% of people think L&D is important, which is awesome. It also told us that 87% of the people who had an LMS didn't necessarily like it, and they're having problems with it. And the more bonkers thing is that 80% of them had more than 2 LMSs, in some cases 3 and 4. So then we started going, well, how many times in life do you have 3 or 4 of something that doesn't work really well, that you keep, but you think is really important? And it's really intriguing. Now, the neat thing for us is 75% of those respondents said, if we could connect learning and performance, that would change the game. So other things that the survey told us on the performance review side is that 46% of people believe that performance reviews don't reflect their capability. I won't go into the detail, but you can download the report. I'm going to give you a QR code here in a second. The study was phenomenal because 33% of the employees didn't feel the process was fair, 35% didn't feel confident the organizations could accurately identify their competencies, And we think there's a huge opportunity in that. This is where I met Grace. Now, I met Grace over Zoom. This is our first time in person. And we've had many Zoom calls. But when we met, I talked to Grace about this because we were interested in creating a new software category at G2 that connects performance and learning. That conversation got interesting fast because she has access to thousands of companies who are trying to do different things with technology. So where it led us to this point where we started looking at this concept of connecting performance and learning, and then how that ties to productivity. And the data that she started pulling back was phenomenal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it to Grace, and Grace is going to do a little introduction of herself, and then she's going to take us through this data, which is proprietary. This is really hard to get data. You guys won't get a lot of it anywhere else, so it's sort of a neat thing. I'm going to turn it over to her and let her talk it through. So Grace, tell us a little bit more about this overall performance management review discussing productivity. You found a trend there, so take us through that.
Yes, thank you, Keith. Really quick, I want to introduce myself. I am Grace Savides. I'm a senior research market analyst from G2. I'm going to steal a page from Keith's book. How many of you out there have heard of G2 before? Please raise your hands. Okay, we've got some hands. G2 is an online review marketplace for B2B software and services. So that's when reviewers are looking to review software or see if software is reliable, look for reviews on it, you come to G2 or elsewhere, I suppose. One of the first things Keith and I talked about was this idea of productivity and productivity coming up in performance management. I will say that, performance management, productivity is always top of mind, but not necessarily something that gets discussed outright. So what I did is I took a look at all of the reviews for the performance management category between the years of 2021 and 2025. As you can see, we have kind of an initial level set of about 12%. So that's 12% in specifically the forms, the title, the benefits realized, business problems solved, and then what did you like, what did you dislike, where productivity is coming up. And then as you go on, you can see that the numbers rose a little bit in 2023 and 2024, and then this year in particular, 2025, they've really gotten quite a bit higher. The reason is, I think, a couple things. Of course, there's the HR skills gap that we've been talking about for years if you've been in this industry. So the skills that takes to do a job and the skills that employees have to do that job, there's a gap there, and it's becoming bigger and bigger. The skills to do any given job are changing. There's economic pressures, so we've got inflation, we've got a lot of slow economic growth this year, and then, last I would say AI, which is I'm sure something you'll hear again and again at this conference. And that just kind of throws gasoline on a fire, is what I would say, and has made it just an ever-present concern to do more.
Yeah, that's a good summary. I was sort of shocked by this. I'm curious in the crowd, where you guys we already established a lot of you are working in learning programs, a lot of people are doing some performance stuff. Have you started hearing productivity come into these conversations more regularly? Can I just see a show of hands where suddenly we're seeing, hey, productivity's coming up? I can't see hands unless you guys get really proud of it. All right, cool. So maybe 10%, 20%. It's becoming a thing for sure. Grace, this was the next thing that we thought was interesting, because when we looked at common themes in performance management reviews, you started to find something in the data around this topic of feedback and productivity. Why don't you take us through that from a data perspective?
Yeah, of course. We have here, this was again from those same forms. So the title, what do you like, what do you dislike, and then the benefits realized. This is from the same time. The difference is that these were kind of the key themes that we pulled out of the review. So for this, I asked, I looked at three top themes for each of the reviews, and then kind of averaged those themes to see what came up the most often. So this is just reoccurring the most often that's coming up in these themes. kind of the top results are what you would expect from performance management, but where it really gets interesting is feedback. And I think, something that we see over and over again is just how important that feedback is, whether it's upward or downward or peer to peer. Feedback is a really essential component of performance management. We also see employee experience. This is a word that can mean a lot of different things, I think, to a lot of different people, but it's really kind of every aspect of the employee's experience, how they feel about the company, how they feel about their work, how they feel about what they're doing. So interesting that people are really looking for those kind of insights out of their employees during this process. And then last is goals and alignment. So that's not only, setting goals, making sure those goals are on track, but are those goals in line with the broader company goals? So whether that be OKRs or whatever methodology you might use.
Great. So where we went next was this idea of corporate LMS. Now, what was interesting to me when I talked to Grace about this, and we hear this again and again and again, not another LMS. Now, keep in mind the earlier slides that I talked about. 96% of people think learning and development's important. 80% of people have more than 2 LMSs. 69%, I think it was, don't like their LMSs. So it's sort of weird, right? It's a bit of an interesting thing. But what we saw that shocked me in the data that Grace presented was this thing, productivity again. Now, one of the things I hate about that term, productivity, is I think most people have been in an executive meeting and said, listen, we're in learning and development, get people to be more productive. But what does that actually mean? It's one of those really loaded terms that are very difficult for people to action on. What I think was interesting here, Grace, was that we saw productivity come up in LMS. And why don't you talk a little bit of that? Because you and I are both like, that's fascinating. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think something that's interesting to note about this data is this was very specifically one question on the review form, and that was, what are the business problems solved or benefits realized from this solution? So this is directly people talking about corporate LMS and productivity, which when I think of corporate LMS, I think compliance training, I think upskilling. Productivity isn't necessarily the first thing that comes to mind. There are just so many other solutions that more directly tap into productivity. So it's interesting to see this coming up in corporate LMS. Again, a completely different system for performance management as a growing concern. And these are kind of the top themes, again, from this category. And the other ones are all, I think, pretty, again, what you would expect: employee training, compliance training, monitoring learning. But that productivity really stands out as this is a concern that people are having, not just from a performance management perspective, but down in a training perspective as well.
That's awesome, yeah. I would encourage you guys, this is based on reviews, right? So think of all the people using the software that you guys have deployed. And G2 is, I think, the largest review site in the world at this point. I don't know that, it's pretty close. It's a big one. So this is what your employees are saying about the software that they positively review from an LMS standpoint. So you may not have thought of positioning it that way internally, but your people really want you to. So why is productivity top of mind more so than before? So Grace and I literally we've had so many Zoom meetings, we're like, what is going on here? Why are people suddenly talking about learning and productivity, performance and productivity? I think you'll probably hear every speaker say something to the effect that we know the environment is challenging right now, right? Most people are dealing with not bigger budgets, smaller budgets, not bigger, more resources, smaller resources. So for us, Grace brought this up to me, and it's an interesting article that she's written, so this is one you probably want to scan. She brought up this concept of productivity paranoia that's creeping its way into technology. And keep in mind, this section's about where we think technology is going, so we're going to tie this together here and here at the end. But I'm going to turn it over to Grace and let her talk about this article, because when she told me about it, I'm like, oh my God, Grace, that is so fascinating. So go over to Grace.
So, productivity paranoia is a term that actually I'm interested. How many of you have heard the term productivity paranoia before? Raise your hands. Okay, not many. This is something I've definitely yeah, it's something I've seen in kind of the HR thought leader sphere coming up in the last couple years or so. It's twofold. So one, there's a disconnect between management and employees about how productive their teams are being. And if you look at the article, I don't have the study in front of me, but basically employees think they're being more productive, and then leadership thinks they're being less productive. So there's an obvious bias there on how they're just looking at productivity. But the other side of that is that there is a pressure on everybody to be more productive and to demonstrate that you're more productive. And that's really where productivity paranoia lies. What's really interesting is this can lead to something called productivity theater. I I think maybe
Just
you
real
all.
quick, does that term immediately make sense to people? Productivity theater? Yeah, okay, good.
I think you
That
can all
makes
kind
sense
of
to me.
maybe picture somebody in your sphere who you would accuse maybe of productivity theater. But the idea is that you're spending more time demonstrating how much you're being productive rather than being productive. And it's important to communicate what you're doing, but productivity theater is a step beyond that. It's just really look at me, look at everything I'm doing. And the important thing about it is that it does not tie into productivity. And ultimately, what this really leads down to is kind of an erosion of trust between leadership and employees, where everybody's concerned about productivity, nobody's really sure what that means, everybody has a different definition, everybody has a different, understanding of how productive they're being, and it leads to, not more work getting done and a breakdown in communication. And I think that's something really important to take away, if you take away anything from this conversation.
Yeah, I loved this one. So now let's tie this back together again. Like, where's learning tech going, right? Okay, well, if we believe we learn to perform, and if we believe the survey data from thousands of people reviewing software say, when we want successful projects, it will increase productivity for me as a learner, then we start seeing a lot of survey data saying, hey, productivity is becoming more and more of a trend within learning tech. Is that theater? Is the question. And that's what was interesting between Grace and I. We were wondering, are people just saying that out of fear or compulsion, right? They feel like, hey, I have to be saying that this LMS project is going to increase productivity, when in reality, the survey data tells us it won't. So this is what was really fascinating for Grace and I, because what we started to do is we started talking about this language of performance and learning. And what we determined from the data perspective is that it's bad. And what I mean by that is when we look at our data from a survey standpoint, there's a huge performance review delusion. So when we talk about performance and learning and the idea that people learn to perform, we found that at the top level, 66% of executives felt like things are measured fairly. And again, we feel they're tied. Remember at the beginning of this presentation, you cannot separate the idea that I'm trying to get people learning to perform better. If you buy into that, then you start talking about how performance is measured. 66% of executives feel like it's pretty fair, which is okay, I guess. It's not awesome. 2/3 of your leaders out there saying, I think we do an okay job of talking to people about performance. But here's where it gets really gross. You start falling down the chain. 36% of managers with direct reports, 23% without, 19% of individual contributors feel that that's accurate, which is terrible. So if we believe that tech should be helping us learn to perform, if we believe that productivity is the manifestation of that, and then we get to the point where we actually look at our own internal processes and they're broken, we've got a real problem, folks, right? That's sort of what we find ourselves doing. So now we say, well, what trends are changing with regards to learning and performance that can help address that? And maybe, Grace, do you want to jump in on this one real quick?
Yeah, so something that was interesting is that we were looking, is this the adoption?
Yeah.
Yeah, so something that was really interesting about this is we were curious when it came to adoption rates, what percentage of people are using products within a company. So this is a measure from our reviewers that's, what percentage of your company has adopted, X products. As you can see, for the average B2B product, it's just below about 70%, and it's been pretty consistent. A little bit of, you know, little bit of just alteration there. Um, Corporate LMS has usually been above this, so it's been hovering at just a little bit higher average adoption rate, kind of low 70s%. And then in 2023, it started to dip a little bit, and then in 2024, it went back up. I think you can pretty clearly attribute this, at least in part, to LLMs, and just the fact that training is becoming a little bit more decentralized. More people are kind of taking it upon themselves. However, I do think it's significant that you kind of saw the switch in 2024 and see it coming back up. And I would be willing to say, as corporate LMSs change and adopt, different ways of incorporating AI, that we will continue to see this number do something different. Probably improve a little bit, but who knows the future.
Yeah, from an Acorn standpoint, we can definitely feel the shift. There's definitely something going on out there with, I think you're right, on the AI front and LLMs and whatnot. It's changing the way that people are thinking about learning and LMSs. But what we also find right now, and there's a saying that always comes to mind for me, my grandfather used to say to me, Keith, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed person is king. And right now, it really feels like it's the land of the blind out there. We're all scrambling around trying to figure out, if corporate LMS isn't the thing, what is the thing? And we've been challenged. You can imagine a lot of our clients come to us from a tech perspective and say, hey, we've been doing LMS with you for a long time. We're interested in your concept of connecting performance and learning. With all this activity that's happening and all this plethora of tools, what do we do? And this has been really what we've started to do, is peel that problem apart as a technology vendor to say, what can we practically do with our clients to not just say we're the number one AI, LMS powered genie in the world, because that actually doesn't help you at all. We want to actually give you some different ways of saying, can we allow you to take the productivity theater that many of you guys may be experiencing in these conversations internally? Can we say, hey, there's a way to connect learning and performance materially so that you can actually start to address this productivity thing? So we're pretty excited about it. We've been doing it for a while now, and we're starting to see more and more people come on board with this. So what we see here is people who have actually been working with us in reviews where they're saying, look at these comments here, this allows me to apply for internal training where my career goals are included. Performance and skill development now are part of my capability development. And the performance management, learning and development piece is also now built in. So we're starting to hear customers say, in language that's practical, we're giving our people development plans. Those development plans article their competencies and capabilities towards their job, and there's proficiency conversations. If we can do that as a software provider for you, if we can make you be able to go internally and say, every person in this company is going to have a development plan day one. They're going to know what their job definition is. They're going to know the 4 to 5 things in that job description, capabilities. And there's going to be an interface for the learner and leader to be able to talk about how they're doing in their job. And then the last thing, tie the training towards the capabilities so that any person in any role can start looking at capability libraries and say what training is available for us. We know that these comments come from that. And we've been able to use AI to help in the provisioning of those competency models and capability models, as well as we're actually just announced at this show that we're in the development plans creating an AI interface called Reflections that allow your people, when they're doing their development plan review, to get coaching. And that coaching goes to the idea of, have I talked to my leader, or have I documented already that I need to work on something? Have I done the learning? And is it now in my behavior in the workplace? So we're really excited about this, and we can show you guys if you want to drop by. So wrapping the session up a little bit here, we do have this survey, which I quoted quite a few numbers from. This is not Acorn customers. This has been picked up by Forbes and a number of other publications. This concept of connecting learning and performance is really important in your organizations if you're trying to get funding for learning projects and you're trying to show productivity and performance connection to technology. There's a ton of shocking data in here where you will actually be able to go internally and say, if you don't think we have a problem, here's a survey that's done that illustrates it. And then if you want to have a chuckle, because this is a little bit more formal, go over to our booth, look for the hanging acorn, and read some of the social media comments around how employees feel about learning and performance in their organizations. They are depressingly funny. Like we somehow feel like we have to make a sitcom out of it because it is quite funny and sad at the same time. We have some time for questions, so if anybody's feeling brave, now's your moment.
You had mentioned the idea of productivity paranoia.
If this is going to be you.
I don't know if you have any data to support this, but is that at all, is this a cyclical thing? Like if there's like any sort of economic uncertainty that you get this, maybe an equivalent or the exact same thing within the workplace, or is this a little more unique cultural moment due to technological and other cultural factors?
I would definitely say that there's a cyclical element to it. There was some data from 2020 actually that we saw where productivity came up a little bit more in the reviews. I do think though this is a unique cultural moment with AI. I think in my lifetime there hasn't been as big of an advancement that has threatened to change the way we do work as big as AI. So while, yes, there's a cyclical element, there's an economic element, I do think this is a moment where, in particular, we feel that pressure very uniquely.
What you guys are doing, if you can allow employees and leaders and learners to have better conversations, you'll change their dinner table talk. You'll change what they go home to, what their kids think of their parents and their work experience, all of it. So keep it up, keep the battle going, okay? Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Yeah.